Hello, everyone out there in Radio Land. Once again, it is the Media Cyphers Holiday Special. Today's program will be precluded by excerpts from the Christmas classic with some audio descriptions added for radio broadcast. It's a Wonderful Death. Man in business attire walks down a busy street in New York City, holding a briefcase and talking on their cell phone. Hello? Yes? Oh yeah, how you been? Merry Christmas. Yeah, the kids, I don't know. I'll grab them a gift card on the way home. I am a father after all. So tell me, what kind of year-end projections are we looking at? Really? That's amazing. That's a 40% increase on last year. I told you guys that new AI algorithm for the claims department was going to do wonders. Did we buy off that annoying reporter about us all? Oh, Oh, the company is denying 90% of healthcare claims thing. No? Whatever. Just buy the newspaper. Oh, wait, scratch that. I know Jeff. He owes me one. Can't wait to give myself a delicious Christmas bonus. What was that? Oh, yeah, just give the office workers a Pizza Hut gift card. They seemed to really like that last year. The man is crossing a bridge when an older man falls into the river. Help! Help! Yes, and yeah, look, hey, I'm sorry about the noise. Just a second. Hey, you! I'm on the phone. Can you help? Buddy, it's not my fault you decided to go for a swim in late December. The old man stops flailing and shrugs. Well, it worked just fine last time. Oh, goodness. The older man swims to shore and meets face to face with our businessman. Hello, excuse me. I'm the one who just fell in the water. Buddy, I'm busy. Look, here's a quarter. It's actually a penny. Now, wait just a minute. My name is Clarence, and I need to talk to you. All right, fine. What is it? What are you selling? Oh, I lost my place real quick. Sorry, folks. Okay. All right, fine. What is it? What are you selling? Your salvation, my friend. And I go to church every Sunday. Thanks anyway. That's not quite what I meant. I want to show you what the world would be like if you were never born. The businessman's suitcase and cell phone disappear. Hey, what's the idea? Where's my stuff? You were never born, I said, so you never rose to prominence to become the leader of one of America's largest health insurance companies. Oh, is that a fact? Look, buddy, you need to go ahead and check my LinkedIn. I most certainly. You're a little slow on the uptake, aren't you? Okay, I have an idea. Let's go visit one of your childhood friends back from your days on the farm. Ethereal whooshing, portal sounds, etc. The businessman and the older man now stand in a modest four-bedroom house. A happy family is celebrating Christmas. Oh, Mary, I've got great news.
What could it be, George?
Why, Billy's operation went just swell. He's got to be home just in time for Christmas.
Oh, George, it's a miracle.
What's this? Well, your childhood friend George is celebrating Christmas with his family. His son Billy needed an operation on his appendix. You were never born, so his son's operation was approved right away. What? You see, you weren't there to put the profits of your healthcare company above human need. You weren't there to lobby politicians to stop a single payer healthcare system. And because of that, George and families like his were able to get the care that they need. Did you say single payer? Well, yes, I did. Who who is the president? Well, I don't rightly know. Who is the president, Clarence?
George, you want that? I should turn on the television?
Well, sure, Mary, sure. Isn't President Sanders going to make his annual holiday speech for the workers?
Yes.
Send me back! Send me back this minute, you two-bit guardian angel. I will sue you, I will sue the... Oh, Lord, I give up. The businessman awakens back in Times Square. He bumps into Elon Musk. Elon! Do you know me? Do you know me, man? Oh, yes, yes, calm yourself. I was actually going to ask you, do you want me to send you a Cybertruck for Chris? Who is the president? Who, man? Tell me who. Well, Trump is going to be president next month. He made me head of the Doge department. I'm very important. Yes, that's nice, Elon. I could kiss you. Mwah! Hello, health insurance company. Hello, unfettered profits. Hello, as much power as money can buy. The businessman is approached by a lean, scraggly man with a 5 o'clock shadow. Good man, I say. I think I know you. Oh, well, you should. We grew up together. What brings you to New York? Are you here on business? Oh yeah, I'm definitely here on business. Well, friend, it's a glorious day here in capitalist America. What sort of business are you on? I suppose I'm here to deliver a message from my son Billy, my dead son Billy, whose appendix surgery got denied by your company, you scurvy little spider. In this abridged version of It's a Wonderful Death, George shakes his head and they go have a beer while discussing the glories of the free market. The movie most certainly does not conclude by George pulling out a 9mm and saying, It's Luigi time, because we would prefer our show not to be added to any watch lists that it is not currently on. In a similar vein, the movie does not conclude by a crowd gathering around George and the dead CEO singing uh, Old Lang Syne. Oh, thank you, everybody. I hope everybody enjoyed that little holiday skit from the folks here at Media Cyphers. Um, but yeah, very topical as we go into this year. We're joined now. I think our co-host should be joining us soon. Let's see. I and But we are joined now by a dear friend and comrade. Tristan, Tristan, how are you doing this evening? How was your holiday?
I'm good. First, I just want to say that that story was really well done, and I love the participation by the wife, that's George's wife. That was fantastic. That was great.
Well, yeah, thank you very much. I spent all day working on my Jimmy Stewart impression, so
I forgot she had more lines. I wouldn't have walked
what?
away.
What?
Sorry, I didn't realize there were more lines. I forgot.
Oh, that's no, no, that's fine, huh?
We
All
want to
right.
cut costs.
All right. Um, okay, so as our holiday special, also if you are a longtime listener, perhaps you already know the format, but this is we're going to talk about the year that was, some of the big stories that either the media didn't really talk about or were kind of covered in a biased, very pro-capitalist way. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 WIDR or Western Michigan University, no matter how festive or insightful they may turn out to be. So we're gonna go ahead. Let's go ahead and dive right into it. Nora, unfortunately, is not going to be able to join us. Haven't heard back from Lawrence yet. Hopefully, they'll be hopping on soonish. But since you took the time out of your day to join us for this fun holiday special, Tristan, why don't I want to kind of give the floor to you, and we can talk a little bit. I've got some specific Kalamazoo stories I certainly want to talk about. But I invited you on here specifically because I know this last year you have been working so hard on stuff with We the People Michigan, and trying to kind of lobby folks in Lansing to push some pro renters' rights bills. And I think one of the stories that kind of got ate up in the holiday crunch, a lot of my listeners may not have really seen too much of, was how the lame duck session played out. I was wondering if we could kind of talk a little bit, especially just from the perspective of somebody who has been organizing over the past year, um, kind of your organization's efforts to lobby for renters' rights and how that played out in the final days of the Democratic trifecta. So again, we spent a lot of last year talking about the dysfunction within the Democratic Party that led to the election results. And guess what? There was some Michigan based dysfunction as well. So we want to make sure y'all were aware of it. So Tristan, with that kind of prompt, if you could maybe just tell our listeners again about what you've been up to into this year and how that played out in Lansing in the final weeks of 2024.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I'm happy to share about my experiences. For your listeners to know, as you already mentioned, I am a staff organizer with We the People Michigan and We the People Michigan Action Fund. But here, in the context of this, I'm a longtime friend of yours, Andy, and I'm here more in a personal context. So I don't want some of this, if I offer some opinion about how things went this year, it's my own opinion, not that of We the People's, but and I'm not here in a work capacity at all. But um, yeah, it has been a long challenging year, but also filled with a lot of learning opportunities. And I'm happy to talk a little bit about. I don't know if you want me to just kind of like go into what we've been doing specifically, or and maybe kind of go back and forth because there are some times where you kind of got involved in this fight along the way with me as well. So um, but to give some general background information on folks on what my role is and what our fight has been with We the People, if you follow me on Facebook or if you've seen me around town or any of my previous times on your show or others and locally, We the People, more specifically the team that I'm a part of, known as the Home Team. Well, even then, I don't even want to. I should be more background information. We the People is a nonprofit organization that's focused on trying to get people self-advocating for political power, coming from a base up perspective. So, trying to get people advocating on behalf of themselves, trying to get base working people in the community working on behalf of themselves to build power that is progressive and protects the interests of working class people. And We the People was instrumental in the Democratic Party securing the Democratic trifecta in the state in 2022. And for your listeners who aren't aware, this is the first Democratic trifecta in the state of Michigan in 40 years, a time during which the Republicans have had three state trifectas in the same time. And if you're my age, I'm turning 38 next month, and you've lived in Michigan this whole time, you will have seen the ways that the Republican Party, when they have taken over power in the state of Michigan, have made sweeping transformation in the way they do things at the state level, and obviously they're working very hard to privatize as much as possible and provide as much benefit to private capital as humanly possible. So that's obviously what the Republicans in each of their goes is try to focus on, and obviously they lean into the cultural war as well. So to try to give some crumbs to their constituents, trying to go after abortion rights or gay rights or something like that, but focused really heavily on trying to defend. Uh, you know, capitalist values. And so we worked really hard back in 2022, we the people did, to try to secure a Democratic trifecta under the auspices that with the Democratic trifecta, suddenly we will have an opportunity to make some real change for the benefit of working class people as opposed to the 40 years benefit of our economic opponents, the property owners. And after seizing that trifecta, we the people broke into teams. So they're like, we're going to focus our organizing in these core areas based on the issues that are important to the people of Michigan and important to building power, long-term structural progressive power in the state of Michigan, and the interests that have impacted the lives of the people who work with We the People, the organizers like myself. And so at the start of 2023, the home team and We the People was constructed with a focus on trying to get rent control, the ban on rent control lifted in the state of Michigan. And, generally trying to get the ban lifted and then institute rent control itself, either locally, the plan was locally, or if possible, get it instituted at the state level right away. And that's kind of where I got brought into the fight. That you and I had our fight back in 2018 and focused really heavily on trying to secure renters' rights and trying to get rent control passed was a part of that agenda back then and something that would have impacted my life greatly. I was a student at Western and impoverished, and it was very, very difficult for me to find places to live in the city of Kalamazoo as a student, as someone who had a non-traditional income, and it was very difficult, and that's part of why I've been a part of this fight for so long. Um, but so the major goal was focus on lift the ban on rent control, and you've been involved in various ways throughout that process, that fight, whether it was the rent is too damn high rally last year or the other various events and activities that we've been doing locally and at the state level. And it's been a challenge, right? We've been meeting with state legislators, mostly representatives who are on the housing subcommittee, trying to convince them to adopt our agenda. And there's been a lot of pushback. A lot of people who are in the Democratic Party are very much in bed with these landlords and private property developers, and it's not in their interests, not in their own personal interests, nor the interests of the people who got them into their positions of power for them to pass laws in favor of renters. Like it's just not a benefit to them and their material conditions, and so a lot of them do not prioritize to the point that some people even are openly hostile towards our demands, and have been for the 2 years that I've been organizing and trying to get them this stuff built up. So like I said, lots of lack of support among Democratic legislators. And we were unable to pass through the housing subcommittee. Although we did get support from all of the Democrats in the housing subcommittee, the chair at the time and the new chair, Christian Grant, and their like major bosses basically. So Hoskins, the chair of the Economics Development Committee, and House Speaker Tate did not prioritize our bills, and so they were not heard at all. And that was kind of the state of things going into the election of 2025, the state of our campaign at least. So then the election hits, and we the people, obviously we have hundreds of people throughout the state that are a part of our base. Well, we do not organize at the national level. And we do have some local electoral campaigns, and we had some state representatives and senators even who were endorsed by the We the People. And so groups and various teams were running different candidates and or were involved in just get out the vote, or were involved in election defense. So trying to make sure that the votes would be counted and things like that. Although that didn't end up being something that we needed, that ended up being an issue because the Republicans won. As obviously as we see, the Michigan State House is flipped and we've lost the Democratic trifecta. And the Republicans won at the national level as well in a very big way. So now we have a national trifecta for Republicans under a Republican Supreme Court. So we're looking at a very, very red future right now. During the election, something that I noticed a lot from my colleagues, from general people in the community, and people, whether you're working in politics or you're a normal person, I could just feel there was just fear. I don't know if you felt this, just this palpable fear everywhere that if we don't do what the Democrats want us to do, that it's the end of all of our lives, and that the country is going to come to an end, and yada yada, which is the same shtick that they do every election cycle, right? To get people scared of the Republicans in order to vote for the Democrats. And this isn't an endorsement of Republican policy at all, but it's just the way that they play the game. And so there was a lot of fear around it. But regardless of that fear, I don't think that a lot of people really expected. Personally, I was expecting, I was kind of preparing for the worst with regards to this national election, but a lot of people were really surprised. Even some of my coworkers and colleagues and people who I work with in the organizing world were surprised at how poorly the Democrats did, nationally and locally, and throughout the state. And there, yeah, so a lot of people were kind of reeling, but we the people decided that we didn't have time to be like, okay, well, everything's over and we have to end, because now we had 8 weeks. 8 weeks throughout the course of the lame duck to try to get something passed, something to protect, and that's literally the last opportunity that we have. And we've been pushing, we've been meeting with legislators, but now we're like, this is our last chance. Let's try to push as much as we can. So the last 2 months, 2.5 months, was a big push on trying to get something, anything through Lame Duck, which you were a part of, and others in the Kalamazoo team were a part of, whether they came to Lansing or they were helping with phone calls and emails from home. Um, so, and the decisions that we made as a group, um, uh, well, I guess I'll get into that. So, just with regards to the rent control campaign and where we're going with that, and uh, unfortunately, as lame duck hit, it kind of became pretty clear at that point that rent control was kind of out the window. We had been pushing really hard, but we just did not have real champions. Rep. Reingans, who was the one who introduced the Lift the Ban bill from Ann Arbor, although she's obviously very much in support of passing the bill, we just didn't see like any form of like a coalition, like she's co like creating a I don't know, like a tight-knit group of legislators who were willing to hold the line on behalf of renters. It just wasn't happening. And even though it's something that we were pushing, we were trying to convince them to prioritize, it just wasn't happening. And so at the start of Lame Duck, we had to come up with what is our priority going into this? Is it lift the ban still? Is our priority going to be lift the ban? And based on kind of communications with our coalition members, fellow coalition members, and everything, it just felt like it wasn't a viable. It just wasn't going to happen, no matter how much we for some the property question, Andy. Every time, like that's why all these other bills that we talked about and everything, and it's so good stuff that we're fighting for. That's why always, and I've been saying this for 2 straight years that this is the big fight, that because it addresses. How is it right? Is it just that a person who owns property is allowed to charge any amount they want? Is that a just property relation? And obviously, we would say it's not. It's not a just property relation, that this is a necessity for living. People need a place to live, and having unfettered market like principles is there's a reason that people are being abused, people are being exploited, and our pocketbooks are being exploited for 40 straight more, I mean 100 years, but like even more so. The last 4 years, rent has gone up 45% in like just since the pandemic in Kalamazoo, and I'm telling you right now, in another 4 years, that's what we're looking at. And but regardless, so because rent control would be such a powerful change, that's why we know that there's still too much pushback. Too many Dems are too bought in on well, we're going to be friends with all the landlords, we're going to be friends with all the property developers and all that stuff, and that's who all their people are, and so they don't want to piss any of them off. I just saw that Lawrence came in. If you want to say hi to real quick. Hi, Lawrence. You're muted, Andy, if you're
I had to
muted.
unmute
Hello,
my
can you hear
microphone.
me?
Yeah.
Yo,
Yes,
yo,
yes,
hello,
Lawrence.
can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Yeah.
Yes.
What up,
Welcome,
everybody?
welcome, welcome to the holiday special, my friend. That's it. Yeah. That's it. Yep. So catch you up to speed. We're talking with Tristan. They're kind of laying out their year in review, kind of working on stuff. And you might have some insight on this too, because basically the topic we're talking about right now, one of the big stories of the year was, the executive dysfunction in Lansing during the lame duck session. We're kind of working our way up to that, but I think I remember our last show you were talking about you were working with some colleagues too who was trying to push some legislation in the lame duck. So um, yeah, I think we'll be able to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But first, how are you and how are your holidays?
A bit stressful. Not gonna lie to you. Did a lot of traveling over the holiday break. Oh, and it's been mostly good. Mostly, yeah, everything's been pretty smooth. How's everybody?
Doing well enough. The new year, new year, new man-made horrors that we're gonna have to comprehend whether we like it or not. Um,
Sounds about right. Sounds about
yeah.
right.
All right,
Jeez.
so Tristan, let me kick it back to you. I was make
Okay.
sure kind of finish up talking about again, we the people and where you were positioned when
Yeah.
things started unraveling during lame duck. Yes.
Yeah, so I tried to organize my thoughts a little bit earlier so I could make sense of everything for or try to make sure to hit all the main points. But to give people some context, the Dems were really pissed with Tate from the start. So just after the election, going through the election, the Dems were pissed at Tate from people we're talking to, a lot of people. A large number of Dem legislators were unhappy with Tate's refusal to hear on many, many bills that have sat in committee for the duration of the trifecta, no effort to push them from leadership. Unless it was specifically handed down by Whitmer, they didn't want anything to do about it. And there's a lot of people who wanted and who had constituents who wanted things passed to protect them and their people that they weren't ready to hear it at all. And this is across the board, not just the progressive policy and the housing stuff. So at the start of the lame duck, to try to quell this a little bit, and there's a lot of panic around Trumpson, Tate told everyone in the House that if they can get the votes necessary for things to pass, then it will be put to the floor. So he said across the board, if you got the votes, then we'll hear it, we'll put it on the floor. It became, and so you think, oh, that's a really good thing. But it became very, very apparent very quickly that the Dems had done little to no job of their own whipping votes on their own bills. And so things were thrown into chaos, like literally. Like suddenly everyone's like, oh, well, this is our chance to get this passed. How many votes do we have? Everyone's calling everyone else. So we the people and the Rent is Too Damn High, which is the coalition that we're a part of, had already planned on pushing for lame duck legislation. We'd already had it in our packet. We were planning on doing it regardless of who won the election. And so we are already prepared to have demonstrations and to begin pressuring right away. So we held a day-long event with the Rent is Too Damn High coalition, which I believe you were able to attend in Lansing. Hundreds of people tied to housing justice work in the state in Lansing, trying to lay out our demands to folks. This is your last chance. Get this stuff passed before lame duck's over. After surveying our base, talking to everyone, like I mentioned, we had decided among our coalition that the lift the ban was an unlikely win for the lame duck, and so we asked of the dozen or so bills currently sitting in committee, what are some that we think would be really meaningful? And we came back with a list, which included eviction expungement, right to counsel, removal of junk fees, revising short-term rentals, and the homeless Bill of Rights package. And we kind of jumped right. So like we decided all those ones would be meaningful to our base, and so we jumped into contacting. We literally called each single representative in the House of Representatives and every senator in trying to get their vote, find out which way do they support, what is it going to take to convince you, yada yada. Unfortunately, a lot of legislators don't either just don't show up to the office or don't feel like it's their job to communicate with their constituency because a lot of them were really, really hard to get a hold of. We held an org-wide lobby day on December 13th, where we had dozens of meetings in person in the offices, and we pulled people off of the House floor. We had a sit-in at Tate's office and spoke with media multiple times, and like still just trying to keep the pressure on. Um, and but as like time weared on, so we're getting into December now. That was December 13th was the lobby day. Oh, sorry, December 3rd was the lobby day. We're really cutting into how much time do we have left. And it became apparent just how disorderly things were because nothing was getting done. Nothing was passing. People were in a state of panic. We're talking to offices. Hey, are you going to support this? Yeah, if it comes up, we'll support it. And I'm like, okay, are you going to go talk to someone? Well, we don't even know who to talk to. We're talking about this, that, and the other thing. So they just weren't there. It was everyone running around with like chickens with their heads cut off. Um, and it should be noted that during this time, during the lame duck period, that the organized wealth of our state and beyond our state was working very, very hard on both sides of the aisle, landlord and property development associations, even multiple mayors throughout the state were contacting individual Democrats and telling them very directly that they cannot vote for any of the tenants' rights legislation. They cannot vote for the homeless Bill of Rights. They cannot vote for this any progressive legislation whatsoever. But even some of the other legislation, like what would you consider neoliberal, like capitalist stuff, even some of that they're against because not they don't want anything that the Democrats, they just didn't want any of it passed. So we had a lot that was up against us, a lot of moneyed interests that were coming into Michigan trying to sway things. And uh, so the only renters bills that ended up being a potential, this is leading up to the last 2 weeks or so of lame duck, were the eviction expungement and right to counsel. Those are the only two that stood a chance. And then the homeless Bill of Rights. So we had those three. And during the third to last, it might have been the third to last or second to last housing subcommittee, we all showed up. We were expecting ahead of time for our bills to be heard and passed, and none of them were. So they told us very directly that they would be in the meeting. They didn't pass any of them. Luckily, we had organizers there that day. We had our lobbyists and our policy research team pushing in their offices. By the end of the day, they had remet and they ended up passing all three of the bills to the House floor. So eviction expungement, right to counsel, and the homeless Bill of Rights all left committee. Finally, after us pushing for 2 years on everything, including lift the ban, but these were a part of those discussions as well. They finally moved out of the committee. Um, and at the next House session, so this was a week and a half before the end, and everyone's going to go to Christmas break and it's over. A week and a half before, so at the next session, they failed to present the bills. And we continued to agitate, and then at the following session, they passed eviction. It was hours all day long of them on the floor arguing, and they passed eviction expungement, or a really, really watered down version of eviction expungement. And they had a temporary pass for homeless Bill of Rights. Temporary pass means that everyone passed except for one person. And this is where things really, really started to fall apart, which you probably like might have seen some of the news articles. But so to give you some further context, Republicans had already refused to participate in the session proceedings whatsoever, which the Attorney General, the state Attorney General, like pointed out is against the law. So, but they all walked out. So they weren't going to be a part of anything during the session. And at this session, when Homeless Bill of Rights bill went up and it was supposed to be voted upon, uh, Democratic legislator Karen Whitsett voted no, and then voted yes. Oh, sorry, she voted yes and then voted no, and then withdrew her vote. So she didn't know what she wanted to do, whether it was, party loyalty or what loyalty to her donors, right? But she did. She was the holdout. And we had anticipated that she might end up being a holdout because when we showed up to previous meetings and tried to sit down with her to have a conversation, she did not want to hear from us. When we showed up to her office to try to talk to her legislative director, we were like, can we come back in 30 minutes to see if she's here? And literally 30 seconds of her just staring at us without talking because they didn't want us there. They didn't want anything to talk. They didn't want to hear from us at all. For if you're curious, Karen Whitsett, her district is part of Detroit and Dearborn. And she has a history of some outside party or going against the party a little bit. She had multiple statements in the past in support of Trump during the Trump presidency, the previous Trump presidency, with regards to the use or the COVID pandemic and the use of certain medications and things like that. It was asinine. So this isn't the first time she's had some issues, but this time she like held off. She didn't want to vote for anything. And session ended with the plan being like, well, we're going to reopen tomorrow. We're going to go back. We're going to convince her, and then we're going to come back and we'll be able to continue everything and we'll be done. And then the next day, Whitsett had an interview. I don't know who did the interview. She had an interview. She basically blamed Tate for his poor leadership, said that Tate yeah, she basically talked very poorly about Tate and all the Democratic leadership. She said that there were dozens of bills that were being presented and discussed with, quote, no time to review them and no time to digest revisions either. Please keep in mind, though, that a lot of these bills were sitting in committee, like I said, for years. And so the idea that we're getting to the lame duck now and suddenly it's a big surprise that we are pushing for these, it's not, it doesn't make any sense. But regardless, that then so she claimed that she hadn't read them, that she was mad about the whole process. She thought it was too chaotic and that nothing was being done. Um Witset also explained that she had been in conversations with Republican leadership as well. So she apparently has been close with the incoming House Leader Matt Hall, and the Republicans, and yeah, so it sounds like she's like trying to cozy up to the Republicans because they're coming in, and uh, the Republicans and a lot of Democrats were also really focused on this legislation regarding tips and wages. There was a lot of heated debate regarding that bill as well. So even though I wasn't associated with that, that seemed to have something to do with it as well, that they couldn't come to a decision on how they wanted to do the tipped wages and stuff like that legislation. But in addition to that were a lot of other bills, including the housing and renters' rights bills. So based on the information that we have and what we've observed the last few months, it appears that Witset's trying to buddy up, like I said, to Republican colleagues. And, talking bad about Tate is kind of an easy in because she's right. Tate did drop the ball. He has for the last 2 years. Did a very, very poor job in advocating for working class people, and and he's only received accolades, right? Even now, they're still celebrating his leadership and what a great job he did as Speaker of the House, and it's BS. And so yes, so regardless of her own, role in gumming up the works and trying to get things passed, does have a point that Tate does have responsibility as well, and everything kind of going haywire. With her refusing to vote on any further legislation, um, the House ended. So they were supposed to show up again to vote. She refused to vote on anything, so House session ended. There was nothing left to be done. So the Senate opened as well. They opened for I don't know, I think it was over 24 hours. And the Republicans forced them to read every bill in their entirety before they were allowed to vote as a stalling tactic. And the Senate session ended without passing a single renters' rights bill or the homeless bill of rights, and nowhere near the number of bills that the Republicans have passed in each of their trifectas at the lame duck either. So all in all, yeah, like you said, a fustercluck, and especially when it comes to the interests of working class people and renters, right? There was a mess regardless of what bills they're trying to pass, whether they're trying to, ostensibly try to protect the rights of the middle class, so they're trying to defend the interests of small business owners and such. But regardless of even all that, it was all a mess. It was all a mess, and it's easy to point fingers at Witset too, but like I said, the whole like the Democratic leadership, this clique of people who have run things are also responsible as well. So I hope that kind of explains where things went. There's a lot of other stuff that happened and was involved as well. A lot of different situations that people experienced, and I'm curious how you felt about everything that you experienced or anything along the way. But I hope that gives a clear picture for folks. So.
No, I think that was a brilliant breakdown of kind of what happened last winter. And I think, you bring up a really great point. A lot of people who pay attention to this stuff have kind of been trying to paint Witset as the sort of Joe Manchin or Kristen Sinema type figure in statewide politics. But as you astutely pointed out, um, the overall dysfunction of the Democratic Party, and just again, there was a lot of hubris, thinking like it was just kind of the election was in the bag for them, that they would have more time, and just again the combination of donor influence and just innate incompetence, which has been kind of an overall theme from this year, is just again witnessing the collision of those incompetences with the influences of the donor class. You see in both the statewide and national level. Lawrence, I'm kind of curious if you have any reflections on this. I know we the last show we did before winter break, you were talking a little bit about some stuff that orgs you were involved with doing. So I don't know if you've been keeping up with the you kept up with the the lame duck news in Lansing, or if you had any thoughts on it.
I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I did not in any way, shape, or form keep up with any of the lame duck stuff. Um, Mostly because of the work that I was doing, the type of work that I do. It I it's a lot of stress, and I chose to deplug from news and politics over the week. You know,
That is extremely
um,
valid. Yeah, that's
yeah,
kind of
like it was a
that's
lot of
That's
it was a
that's what I've
lot
been
of
doing the last few weeks. I've been
yeah,
unplugging,
yeah.
baby. I
It
needed
was
it.
it
yeah,
was a lot of self care. It was a lot of self
yeah.
care that I was doing over the break because
Mhm.
I did not want to hear it. I didn't want to hear about it. I didn't want. I was like, I will deal with it next year,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um,
I hear that.
it,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. But the thing that y'all both said that resonated with me was, yeah, the we saw what happens to a political party where they care more about the donors and the will of the donors than the will of the people, right? Like that kind of sums up 2024, and from on a state level and on a federal level. Like it's it's not surprising to me that someone in the state party wanted to pull a Joe Manchin or a Kristen Sinema when it comes to the average rights of the average rights of Michiganders. And on a broader level, you know, when we talk about the last election, like it's funny how the state level echoes a lot of the dysfunction and misguided and just incompetence that you see on the national level. So I'm not surprised at anything that you said.
Yeah, no, not at all. And I do also want to highlight, amongst just you know, a lot of us are just like doomed prophets watching like just the everything falling down around us. But there were and when I think about like my stories of the year, a lot of them were very local. And I think despite everything that's happened at the statewide national level, this was a year we really saw a lot of Kalamazoo workers, the Kalamazoo's working class, really assert itself. You had um, we were back in I believe this was March or May. We had the big report from you had baristas at Crow's Nest, Water Street Coffee making a lot of noise about their working conditions. You had folks at Petco out in Portage, doing a union drive. We had one of the most high-profile labor struggles in recent years right here at the university when the university administration was going head-to-head with the um, professors' union. And the professors did end up getting at least enough concessions to pull a victory out of that. But, go back. We had a really great interview with Catherine Bailey, one-on-one, talking about just the really pernicious way the university was trying to uh, really like crush the union, get them out. And despite all that, I guess one of the most aggressive anti-union campaigns they've done in years. The union was able to come out on top, and I think this is something that we should really keep in mind in these rough years to come, as we are seeing like just the apotheosis of this sort of really big fascist drive from the federal government. Is that here at the local level, we still can organize and organize successfully. I think back even you Tristan, and the way earlier this year you guys pushed the city commission to pass that rent control. resolution, which again may not bear fruit for a few years now, but I think it does speak to the way that you know us here at the local level can push the needle in a way where even though it's easy to get cynical about what's going on at the national level, I really do think there were some really great working class victories. I do want to kind of couch that in a caveat that I think we also did see the way that Kalamazoo's ruling class can bite back on that thing. A crow's nest story. The name of this show is Media Cyphers. We focus a lot on how local and national media react to the story and to stories, I should say, and everything we saw from M Live and from WWMT Channel 3 when they were covering Crow's Nest was basically giving the owner the benefit of the doubt, and moreover, giving the owner the last word on it, saying there's no pest infestation, and completely ignoring all the other allegations of low wages or working conditions, harassment. Those were not mentioned by any outlet except for cheer hats off to WMUK. So we did really see how even local media, which again a lot of people trust their local newsman over say cable news, can be really complicit when these kind of petite bourgeois business owners are pitted against the workers themselves. Um, and I also did want to give a shout out. We had one of Kalamazoo's most important voices. We lost earlier last year, DeAndre Jones, who spent the last years of his life really put, organizing around and bringing a lot of attention to graphic packaging and the sort of environmental sacrifice zone they've created in the North Side neighborhood over the last couple of years. And I just want Tristan, want to throw it to you, maybe respond real quick to again, maybe talk a little bit about the significance of that rent control resolution. And then Lawrence, I want to kick it to you to maybe see your thoughts on any of the things I mentioned or other local stories that you thought were really important last year.
Yeah, I also want to point out that like I'm talking about the lame duck and about the fact that we weren't able to win these things, and it can sound very defeatist or like I'm saying, okay, well everything sucks, there's no reason to get involved, and that's definitely not what I'm trying to say. Walking away from lame duck. Um, I wasn't actually super surprised. I felt fatigued. Like Lawrence said, like, oh, I need to take a break. I need to step away from all this. Like, that's definitely like how I felt, just because it's been a lot of effort, for not enough payoff yet. But also the reason it feels like so much effort I feel like that we put into it is because we don't have the power yet, right? Like when I got involved in the fight, the organizing with We the People, even when I got in the fight here just locally, working with you, Andy, and talking to renters and stuff like that in Kalamazoo, like I know it's a long shot. It's a long shot to try to say that we want to cause systemic change, right? But I feel like if we have the numbers, we would have won this time and we will win in the future. I say this over and over again, but there's 25,000 people living in the city of Kalamazoo who are paying 60% of their income on rent. 25,000 people, that's just the city. That's not the county. That's not the whole state. That's one city and one county of the state. And if we can come up with a way to bring those people together in self-interest, then the power's there. The power is there. We just don't, it has to be organized, it has to be brought together. So as things continue to worsen over the next 4 years, next 2 to 4 years, and it's very important that people get involved in organizing. Um, but to speak specifically about the impacts of the proclamation that we won last spring, first of all, that was so exciting. I was so proud of the people who I was organizing with. and people who helped to contribute to getting that passed. And as someone who this is like my first go at trying to do something like that, I felt pretty proud of myself too, in trying in the conversations that we had with local legislators and in trying to pressure this to happen. But pressure is what it took in order to make it happen. At the start of the year, when I was just starting to work with folks to try to figure out what we should be doing to try to lift the ban statewide. State legislators told us we'll try to get a proclamation in some of these cities. Maybe that'll help. And we sent emails and calls to all of the city commissioners and the mayor and everyone else trying to get meetings with them, and no one wanted want to give us the time of day at all. And there was so much motion and activity around the misappropriation of ARPA budget funds and the renovation and selling off of part of the Arcadia Festival site, that we were able to make some waves. So we were able to make some waves to the point that they at least wanted to sit down with us and have a conversation with us. And so that's what we did. We met in groups of about between 5 and 15 people on a weekly basis for about 2.5 months last spring, in order to win each vote individually from each of the city commissioners. And it was hard. It was a lot of like, okay, well, we'll meet now, and then they don't show up, or we call them a bunch of times, we don't hear back. We meet up, we run into them at the city commission meeting. They say they saw the email, but that they don't get in touch with me. That type of thing. Just a lot of it was frustrating. And in the end, it kind of felt like the proclamation itself was somewhat watered down from what we actually originally wanted. So it was a proclamation, but we wanted a resolution. We wanted the city to state that they were resolved to passing rent control and to lifting the state ban. But it ended up instead being like a statement from the mayor. So the actual document that we received was a statement which was written by our group. So uh, the people who are working with We the People KZoo, we collaborated to put together what the proclamation would read. So it did include all of that, and it was signed by Mayor Anderson, but it felt a little bit like, okay, now you've done this, now go lift the state ban. Our job in this is over. When what we really, really wanted was to build a relationship with people like Cooney, with Hess, and everyone, Wilson and everyone, to try to get them to get involved in the fight. It's like, okay, well, you have a position of power here. You're a city commissioner in the city of Kalamazoo, a liberal city that helps to put Democrats in seats of power in the city, and Julie Rogers, she introduced a different version of our bill several years ago. Like, she said that she was in support, but there wasn't any action on their part to really try to get it done. And so it was kind of like, here you go, here's your proclamation, get on with your life, and leave us alone, type of thing. Because a lot of the people who I was organizing with, some folks I'm not with anymore, but some of the folks who I was showing up were really regularly showing up to the city commission, keeping pressure on pretty regularly. And we weren't seeing anything happening, right? They weren't contacting state reps. They weren't working with us to see what can we do locally to make this a big deal, to make sure that we get this ban lifted. It wasn't their priority. But the getting it passed is a win regardless, and demonstrated like at least a small bit of power that the people do have. But if we want to make real serious change locally, it's going to require something way more than that. And I'm still learning as an organizer. I'm constantly learning about what it's going to take for me to get the power that I need and the power that the people need in order to really make changes. But you know, it's not gonna, none of it's gonna work unless people get involved. None of it's gonna work unless people get involved. But yeah, so I don't know how much I want to go, how much further I want to get into everything. But I'm hoping that with the start of the year now in 2025, We the People is taking some time right now to kind of figure out what are our strategic goals as an organization. What are we going to be focusing on and trying to build our base? How are we going to respond to new Republican leadership and trying to secure the power that we need. And then we'll be moving into trying to hosting workshops and opportunities for people, specifically renters in Kalamazoo. How can you, step into positions of power and positions of leadership in order to make the change that we all need in order to protect our rights? But um, I'm sorry if I'm rambling a bit. Please step
No,
in.
no, no. Thank you. By all means, ramble away. And I do want to kick it now to Lawrence. So just either respond to anything or just things. Well, I think we're gonna after this we're gonna kind of broaden the scope a little bit, talk about some national, international stories from last year. But Lawrence, any like really big local things that you want to hit on that you think were really important in the Kalamazoo area in 2024?
Um, I mean, a lot of the things that was already spoken on, but I do want to talk about Cal Safe and some of the CBI work that I was doing, like I was talking about last week, um, trying to get Medicare to cover or pay, uh, you know, street outreach workers like myself and others who are doing the work of helping victims with gun violence, trying to get ghost guns banned, trying to ban bump stocks, and trying to get more money for the type of mental health and mental health and counseling for those who have been victims of gun violence and also those who have done it, like the whole justice lifted type of ideology. That's, basically what my work is, right? And that was what a lot of the lobbying that I was doing. CalSafe and some of the other organizations in Kalamazoo, like Knit Not Broken and Peace Throughout War, and others did a lot of work last year to help a lot of families. If it wasn't for, like, if they weren't helping um with like funeral costs or other things of that nature, trying to prevent and divert people who wanted to retaliate because of said work. And it's not just here in Kalamazoo, also other organizations in Detroit and in Harbor and in Grand Rapids. And there was a lot of work when it comes to street outreach that happened this year. So I want to give those organizations a lot of shout out and praise, not just in Kalamazoo, but also across the state, because a lot of work on trying to uh, not just get guns off the street, but get people to see that there's other ways of dealing with conflict, especially ones as violent as the situations I have to deal with. And there's a lot of great organizations that's dealing with that work. I just wanted to give a little bit of praise on that. That's all. But the biggest story, if we're going to talk about the biggest stories of last year, we I would hate to start it off, but the mainstream media lying about Biden and his cognitive decline. The number of stories that have been coming out recently from the inner circle of Biden's inner circle of and others talking about since day one they knew he wasn't all the way there. And that, again, we talk about mainstream media and how media shapes perspective. How many stories did we see in those first 2 years while we are seeing his cognitive decline in real time? How many of those stories did we see of him being told, "Hey, he's actually all the way there. He's a real dynamo. He's X, Y, and Z, right? He can he's the next FDR, right? You remember those lies, right? And then it all came to a head during the debate. So they couldn't lie anymore. But all that time before him was nothing but lies because of, again, the Democratic Party's donors wanting him to stay in and his own hubris and the people around them, the Democratic Party, hiding this man from the country. We didn't have a primary. They shoved VP Harris into spotlight the fact that VP Harris didn't even have a plan on taking over because she knew if the inner circle knew that he wasn't all the way there, she also knew that he wasn't all the way there, and she didn't even have and she did not have a plan from the get go of being like, all right, this is how we're gonna have to run things because we're gonna have to hit the ground running, right? And then seeing $1 billion in 100 days, $1 billion in 100 days go up in smoke, just go up in smoke. It was extraordinary to see that. I don't understand. Like that's the biggest story. The mainstream media lying to us about Biden, uh the Democratic Party choosing to actively gaslight their own people by telling you were a bedwetter if you was to bring up the fact that he's in cognitive decline. The fact that they slow walked us into fascism and the Democratic Party, with the help of a Republican Party, slow walked us into fascism because of the will of the donors over the will of the voters. That was that's the big outside of Bibi Netanyahu being the worst serial killer I've ever seen in my entire life. Like
Oh, we'll
we
get
used
to
to,
that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I
Uh,
I did I wanted to comment a little on what you said because it was a very fascinating year in kind of again observing capitalist media and especially something that's fascinating about this particular story I think is you saw in real time the pipeline of like kind of again the this kind of liberal donor class ruling class and the mainstream media because in oh gosh was it late August July after that debate you could literally see kind of the wheel turning around we need to replace them we need to replace Joe Biden with a different candidate with Kamala Harris whomever um would be most comfortable for the ruling class to install. And this plays out even into the election season as well. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So you again, this was a kind of a watershed year. Something that connects a lot of these stories is it was it was a moment where a lot of working people in the United States saw that the emperor has no clothes, and that is not specifically referring to Joe Biden, but like again, the system itself. We're gonna probably talk more about the genocide in Gaza, but that was another situation where again, like the mask is thoroughly fallen off. Um, we had a situation in the election play out where, again, even going back 4 years, one of the reasons Joe Biden was able to beat Donald Trump was by, again, getting a more traditional pre Bill Clinton coalition together. And he did promise progressive reform. Whether he was
He
going to
also
follow through
promised to
with
be a
that,
one term. He also
yeah,
promised to be a one-term president. Remember, during that
yes,
debate
yeah,
where they stole again, they the Democratic Party chose to take the populist progressive ideology that the country wanted and said, "Hey, Bernie and everyone who's on that side of the ticket, yeah, screw all your feelings." They did it
mhm,
twice. They squashed it twice. And now they're like, "Oh my God, we can't get young people or progressives or our own base to come to us, to come do our bidding now." And that's what it was. Enough people said, "You've lied to us too many times. We're not falling for it. Uh we're not doing it anymore." And
mhm,
the problem is VP Harris was the better candidate. VP Harris was the better candidate. But when you don't have people who can message your policies properly to the American people, you will lose. And it also doesn't help when you start acting like Republicans from the early 2000s, when you parade with Liz Cheney and talk about how you have over 100 CEOs on your side while the average American is struggling with gas and groceries, and you think that's a winning message. Everything about that entire strategy on after the DNC, again, after the convention, because before the convention, she was on fire. I think I even said if she would have kept with the Tim Walz style, progressive populist ideology, talking about rent control, talking about uh, price gouging, going against price gougers, talking about going after the corporations and they have paid their fair share. When she talked like that, she was winning. And then we saw what happened when she stopped talking like that and moved her message to Trump is bad. We saw in real time what happened. And what happened is the Democratic Party got their clocks cleaned. They lost the popular vote. How you lose the popular vote? Like, yeah,
And
yeah.
just a reminder too, like there, it's some of the kind of behind the scenes stuff that's come out since the election. It was a very intentional move. Like again, the big donors, capitalist donors who surrounding the campaign, uh, very explicitly wanted the Harris campaign message to stop talking about all this like working class stuff, talk more about like unity and Trump bad and embrace again all of these neoconservative ghouls that people still hate from 20 years ago. Again, like it boggles one's mind even above and beyond thinking through the money incentive in the national politics, why you would tether your campaign to the least popular politician of the 21st century. But I digress. I think in many ways people I've never seen. I think the biggest difference between even like 8 years ago, again, there was a lot of shock about Trump getting elected. A lot less people were surprised this time. But I have never seen so many disaffected liberals as I saw after this election, because like they saw that their emperor has no clothes. Even a lot of dyed-in-the-wool Democrats who I've seen come out election after election after election. This Seeing the party warn everybody about fascism correctly for months on end, only to just like, well, we did our best. Let's welcome the guy right in, and like sure we throw a tea party for him, and it makes a person realize like a lot of these people just again used it as a way to fundraise. Even after the election, it's like, well, the fascist won. Send us $5 so we can wag their finger at him when they come in and start oppressing the people you care and love.
Yeah,
So
but even look at the things. Even when it comes to everything that happened in 2024, right? We had we had planes lose doors, right? Right? And while flying, we had we had uh we had Biden helping with striking workers, like the railroad workers and others, right? We had a president, a Democratic president that did do things that you would want a Democratic president to do. He didn't do a lot of great things. We could talk about Israel and a couple other things. But when it comes to economic populism, the Chips Act, the I forgot the other manufacturing bill that he passed that helped like the Teamsters and other union workers. The LRB, the National Labor Board, they helped a lot of union workers keep their jobs. I'm not mad at that. Those are things that are progressive things that I want my president to do. When we talk about a lot of mainstream media, because we're in a bubble, we are in a bubble because we consume media like political junkies. The average American did not feel the benefits of the CHIPS Act or any of those other acts because in the moment they didn't feel any of the benefits from these things. And when you're trying to convince people to put you back in office, you have to say, hey, these are things I've done for you. These are things that are positive, that will positively affect your well-being. These are things that will immediately affect your well-being. The Democrats did not focus on the Democrats did not focus on telling that message, while the Republicans, and you have to give Republicans credit here, what did they focus on? They focused on trans inmates getting surgeries. That was their focus.
Yeah,
Their focus was
yeah.
trans inmates getting surgeries, while their cult leader was talking about Arnold Palmer's member in the last few months of the election. Like, just delusional stuff. Absolutely insane delusional stuff. And they lost to that nutcase.
You
And they
know,
lost to that nutcase.
you said so like you put a lot of emphasis on Joe Biden's, you know, pretty obvious decline. Um, but it begs the question, if he weren't, if he weren't um in such obvious mental decline and he did run, would the American people have voted for him? And I think that, and I'm not a oracle, so I can't know what would have been or what might be, but I
If we're going by the internal pollings of their team, he would have lost by 400
that's what I'm
points.
saying, is that
Yeah.
regardless of his own mental faculties, they would have lost, right? And I think that the bigger thing, they quote unquote they hid his mental development or whatever. The big thing was that they didn't want a primary. They did not want a fair primary for a few reasons. But not the least of which being that if there was a fair primary, if there was an anti-Zionist person who went up there into the primary, they would probably be pretty popular.
Oh, you did
During,
have anti-Zionist people who ran.
yeah,
And this is where we have to give out shout outs to Jake Huger from the Young Turks, Marianne Williamson, and what was it? Dean Phillips. Was it Dean Phillips that he was the corporate guy. He wasn't the
and not
anti-Zionist.
it's not that the people who were openly critical of Israel, it's not that they would have necessarily won, right? It's not in all likelihood Bernie wouldn't have won
Yeah,
again, right? But
yeah.
it would have pushed their window a bit. They would have had to be a little more appeasing to their voter base because we would have had that little bit of opportunity to be like, we're not going to vote for someone unless you do this, right? But because um, there was no real primary at all. And yes, there's a primary, but there wasn't. There was no primary.
Oh no, no. They canceled the
They
Florida
canceled.
primary. They
Yeah.
they literally canceled the Florida primary. They
They
canceled the South Carolina primary as well.
yeah, there was no real national Democratic primary
Yeah.
at all. They wouldn't
So
even
you had
even
the
even the convention that they held that you weren't allowed to go there. They refused to speak with my colleague or and it was a travesty. But
no I
they so it wasn't really about like them trying to hide his health. It was more about them trying to rig the system yet again in their favor because they want to win, but they only want to win their way. They want to win, but
yeah.
they only want to win their way. They do not want to win if it's going to mean making any waves at all. And
Oh
like they just don't care. They just don't care. And like this idea that like, oh, now that Trump has won, now fascism is here. I think that the fact that they were able to my entire life, my entire adult voting life, I've never had a legitimate freaking Democratic primary, in my opinion. I guess maybe Obama's first one. But yeah. But
the other part
Keep in mind
not
the
to interrupt you.
OG, just the OG definition of fascism is the synthesis of corporations and the state.
Yeah,
So it's like
the interests of
in
the
some ways
corporate.
we've been there for a minute, but like
Oh,
sorry, go ahead, Lawrence.
no, the other thing, I'm glad. No, I'm glad y'all said that because I wanted to get to the point. Just to add to both of y'all points. The other thing that makes this a lot of it just the framing and messaging. We always talk about this, right? We always talk about framing. How are you talking about a story? You had the Democratic Party choosing to do undemocratic things while saying that the other party they're going against is a threat to democracy. Two things can be true at the same time. That yes, the Republicans are a threat to democracy. They've already said it. When you had Nick Fuentes and others after the election, on the night of the election, saying, "Yeah, ladies, y'all don't have any rights. It's your body, my choice," or and a lot of those troglodytes celebrating, saying, "Hey, Project 2025. Yeah, we were lying. That's the agenda. Where we told y'all before that's what we're doing. It is what it is, right?" How do you message against that? And and you have to have people who are willing to fight back and message aggressively, consistently, and accurately. And like how you were saying, you had people who were willing to do that. But as we saw, the corporate Democrats in the on a statewide basis, they would rather do the bidding of the donors and the will of the donors than listen to what their voters wanted. You had during the primary, the uncommitted vote, I think hit 20% in Michigan. Didn't it hit 15 or
Hmm.
20% in Wisconsin?
Yep. Hmm.
You had almost a quarter of your own voters in the Democratic Party saying, we're not doing this because of what's going on in Gaza. We're not doing this because of the constant lies that you're doing. And you're choosing, and the Democratic Party chose to be like, we don't need them. We're going to go get Republicans from the suburbs. And just like TLC said, you don't go chasing waterfalls.
Well,
Please stick to the rivers and lakes that you're used to.
It's
The
because they
Democratic
don't want
Party
to
chose
represent
not to do
us.
that.
They don't
yeah.
want
They
to
didn't do
represent
that.
those people. They don't want to represent them. They don't want their
Mm.
position of power to be a representation of those populations at all. They don't.
Yeah,
They do
I
not.
we remember what Chuck Schumer said. For every working class person from Pittsburgh we lose, we'll gain two uh, former Republicans in the suburbs. He said that in 2016 when Hillary was running against Trump. And there's a reason they always run headfirst in the strategy, and it's kind of what Tristan is pointing out. They have a vested class interest into appealing more towards the petty bourgeois, because if they were to appeal to the working class on their terms, like politicians like Bernie Sanders does, they would actually have to make concessions against capital, which the people who run the Democratic Party do not want to do.
Oh,
I think,
I just
yeah,
want to say this about the mainstream media. Last thing, please remember who they tried to make the villains. They tried to say Latino men, uh, and women are sexist, right? They're against women. They don't like strong women. They don't like progressive women. Forgetting the fact that Mexico elected a Jewish Latino woman for president. You're telling me that the Latinos and Mexicans that were in Mexico could get a progressive Bernie Sanders style politician in Mexico, but they were sexist and racist in America. I also
mm,
want to remind those sad people because this goes back to the framing. Like, yes, sexism, misogyny, misogynoir, all of those things, patriarchy, all of those things are factors when it comes to a political election. All of those factors are not things that you can control, you can mitigate. VP Harris did a lot of mitigation. She didn't talk about her race. She didn't talk about her sex. She tried to stick to policy. She tried to stick to policy as best as she could. But when you listen to how she was framing and talking about her messaging, how she was talking about her messaging. The fact that she did more press conferences and shows with Liz Cheney and Republicans than the head of the workers union, than with Bernie Sanders, than with AOC, than with any of the actual people who the base loves and supports. You chose to spit on your base's face, and your base bottom fell out. The bottom fell out. And this is what happens when the bottom falls out.
That's 100% true. That's exactly right. But also, the thing that made her lose the election was the genocide in Palestine. I like
Yeah.
it's 100% true. They don't know how to play the electoral game. They don't know who their people are. They don't fight for the right things. They're not making the right friends. They don't give a shit about working class. They're constantly appeasing to the landlords and property developers and these centrist pieces of shit, right? But the reason she lost the election is because they have killed 200,000 innocent people, right? And they can't and won't place emphasis on that. And the further we get away from this election, the less emphasis they're going to be placing on it. They want people to think, oh, it was this, oh, it was that, it was this. It was because they refused to stop the genocide, and it's still going, right? It's still going on. And that's why going into the election, when she first got introduced as the candidate, I was like, all right, great. So that's our choice, right? So they picked another one for us, and this is it, Kamala. Great. I was like, this is their chance. They could wipe the slate clean and say, Biden did these things. We're going to cease all arms sales, and we're going to. I mean, Christ, Bibi was endorsing Trump, right? Like crazy. So, but they could have ended sales. She could have, or she at least could have advocated for it. She didn't really have the power. She could have said like, you know what, I disagree with this about him. I think that there's a mistake on this, and we're going to do things differently. She could have at least said that, but she didn't.
She could have
She
lied.
she
Just
specific
Yeah.
just
lie.
lie, right? She
Just
specifically
lie. Just
like
just say, hey yo, we're not hey, we're the Leahy law. Hey, that Leahy, y'all know I'm a prosecutor, right? I was a DA. So we're just going to follow the laws that's on the books. And the Leahy law says we can't give weapons or money to countries that may be committing a genocide or committing war crimes. So I'm just going to follow the law.
she
That's
she
that.
and
That's
her bonkers Zionist supporters turned her telling Palestinian protesters to shut up into a campaign slogan for her election. That, if I'm gonna say right now that that could go down in history as like that's an eat cake moment. That's like a that's
Yeah.
such an incredible, incredible FU to people who have experienced some of the one of the greatest atrocities of my lifetime, right? And it's not something that happened just last year either. It's been going on since long before I was born, but obviously curling 200 more than 200,000 people in a year. And she turned, what was it? Let me talk. Let me talk. As if it was like her
no.
talking to a
Excuse me. She
Republican.
said no. No, her saying excuse me. I'm speaking.
I'm speaking. I'm
Yeah,
speaking.
yeah.
Yes.
Now to give her credit, the next time she had protesters, she handled it much better, and
I
that's
don't
to
know.
give
She
her.
made my a good close friend of mine and coworker cry for weeks on end because of the way that she and
Oh,
her
oh,
staff
oh,
treated them in Chicago. But
Oh,
oh
I
no,
can
no,
only
no, no.
imagine. Yeah.
Oh no. So again, the speech. This goes back to strategy. You don't spit on your base, right? We saw one political party double down, triple down, so much so that they had a neo-Nazi style rally in the guard of Madison Square Garden. They did not expand their base. They doubled down in their base, and other people who were so discontent with the other side or did not want to vote, chose not to vote or they voted for him, right? You had one side that's doubling down on their base, and again, to agree with you on a number of things, family. But the other side chose not to. The other side was like, "Hey, what you gonna do? What you gonna do? You're gonna vote for the other guy? What you gonna do? You're not gonna vote?" And the American people said, "Yeah, no, like that's it. Like it's like the battered spouse finally being like, you know what? I'm tired of this. I'm enough. I'm done. I don't care."
Um, I did want to now that we've kind of moved on talking about Gaza, and that was definitely one of the big 2024 stories. I kind of want to just approach it from a slightly different angle. 2 points. One, I do want to
Hey,
give a shout out.
hey, folks, I gotta go. I'm so sorry. I gotta
Oh,
dip out. But love y'all. Peace and much
all
love.
right. hmm All right, Lawrence, thank you so much for joining us, and there'll be many more shows to come in 2025. Um, uh, yeah, Tristan, if you want to stay on, you can. Otherwise, we can wrap things. I can kind of just continue speaking tomorrow, but I've got until 8:30. Up to you.
No, let's keep going.
Okay, so one of the things about Gaza that I think was unique to this year was kind of in the same vein as like the emperor has no clothes. Is this was a watershed year in the history of the Palestinian struggle, and I do not want to dismiss or minimize the absolute horrible carnage and just the tragic loss of life, where 40,000 people, absolutely certain, much more likely over 120,000. And one silver, I don't know if you want to call it silver lining or half glass full aspect to this is this has really exposed the so-called rule-based order for what it is, which is to quote They Live, one of my favorite kind of anti-capitalist movies, the golden rule. He who owns the gold makes the rules, which is to say America will go on its platform. It doesn't matter who the president is, talk human rights, human rights, human rights. But when our most important strategic ally, or well, the most not our strategic ally, it's the military and industrial complex's most important strategic ally in the Middle East, when they go around in a literal like fascist rampage, um, and I do mean that, like replicating things that the Nazi government used to do to marginalized groups. When they go around doing this stuff that is incontrovertibly genocide, the US government just puts its hands in its pockets, keeps talking about hostages that the Israeli government has gone out of their way to keep from coming home. Again, it is specifically the Netanyahu government and his cabinet that has been stalling and sabotaging peace talks every step of the way. Not something you hear a lot from mainstream U.S. media, which mostly has functioned to carry water for the U.S. government saying, well, it's Hamas. Hamas is sabotaging negotiations, blah blah blah. Which is you don't have to look to a leftist outlet. You can look at any other news outlet in the world that will give you a more accurate picture of what is going on. To the point where almost every other ally has got dead stop. We cannot support this. This is a genocide. We're talking about the UK. We're talking about Canada. You had Trudeau say that, if Netanyahu shows up here, he's arrested. You have international institutions like Amnesty International and the Human Rights Watch calling a banana a banana. And that is unprecedented because for the first time, the the heinous nature of what the Israeli government it is beyond what the US is able to cover for, and every other Western capitalist ally they used to have has said no, you are doing genocide. These kind of more liberal human rights institutions that I just mentioned have also called it for what it is. Now, I think again, you're these things are probably going to escalate under Trump. It's kind of foolish to believe otherwise. But I think what this has done, even to a lot of people here in the US who don't generally pay attention to foreign policy, can recognize what is going on over there. It is genocide with a capital G. Our government is supporting it. How that is going to play out in the coming year, um, again, things are certainly going to get worse before they get better. But I do think, in a very big way, Israel has definitely lost the kind of cover that it has traditionally gotten from the Western world. And the United States now really stands alone as the only entity that is still providing it material cover.
Absolutely. I think that I don't know. I don't even view. You said you described them as America's most. What did you say? America's best ally or
So
something?
to like again, like they're not to like the average working class American,
Of
but
course,
to
of
our
course.
military industrial complex that
Our
has
most
all its
strategic ally.
objectives in the Middle East. Yeah, they're in that
It's funny when you
sense.
when you said
Yeah.
that, you said most strategic ally, and then my husband in the background farted. But
Good serendipity.
yeah.
Yeah.
I view it as like Israel is a outpost, like a fort, right? It's like a fortification that the US has created in order to protect our interests in the Middle East. Right? That is and it's a very large fort. That's taken us a long time to build, but it's grown in the exact same fashion that the rest of the United States border has grown, right? You look at the history of the colonization of our land over here, and it looks identical, right? Oh, it just takes time. It just takes time. Um, and uh, and so this idea of like separating ourselves from that project, oh, well, we should just stop supporting this country, this bad country, and these bad leaders that are doing those things over there without realizing that um, to do so would be to separate from ourselves, right? Because they are us, right? They are a part of the project, the capitalist over like taking over the world, right? That specifically the West, right? Trying to maintain Western hegemony and uh, like the existence of Israel is a necessary component in maintaining that hegemony, right? It is a necessary fact. So the notion of ending support for Israel, the reason that both parties don't are see it as this unfeasible thing is because they know that if they end support for Israel, that it would mean potentially ending that hegemony, ending the exceptionalism of America. Specifically, not exceptional as in good, but as an exception. We are exceptional. We don't get judged according to uh the same standards of ethics as other nations. We are the exception. And to admit that we are responsible for causing the deaths and this um uh the dislocation or the relocation or whatever, forced relocation of hundreds of thousands of, if not millions of people over the course of 75 years, obviously is not something they could ever possibly admit. They can't. They can't admit it. And it makes me think of like, because you're right, there are a lot of people who are suddenly waking up. And I remember like 10 years ago, I couldn't even, there were times where I was scared to even bring up the word Palestine or talk about those things with a lot of people in liberal spaces because I didn't want them to, because so many people were so uneducated on the issue. But all of a sudden, people are aware. And it's not because they started killing more people. They've been killing people, and yes, they've been killing a lot of people in the last year, but they've been killing people for 50 years. The reason that people suddenly know is because it came into their phones, um, in their own homes, on an app and a medium that was not controlled by the U.S. government, right? That we were suddenly able to see in a similar way of like the chaotic media around the Vietnam War, where there was not as much, you know, rules on what is a journalist allowed to show or say on television about the actions of the US military, right? And so suddenly a bunch of people see all this stuff being broadcast into their home living room televisions and they're like, holy shit, I can't believe we're a part of this. We need to end this right away. Same situation, right? People are suddenly saying, oh, we gotta end this. But what a lot of people, both back in the Vietnam era, as well as now, are failing to understand is that if we really want to end things, then we need power. We need a lot of power. And that power is not going to come from the organizing around an issue that doesn't impact our lives directly. Right. For some people, it does. For some people, feel very energized. They're like, okay, I see this now. I've got to get involved. I got to get involved right away. But that's not the majority of people. The majority of people will say, that's a really shitty situation. I have no power to fix it. I'm going to go back to work and then I'm going to go spend my nice weekend. Right. And what we need people to be thinking is, I have an obligation to help build power so that I can stop this from happening. And the only way to build that power is unionizing. Unionize your workplace, unionize where you live. Unionize your workplace and unionize where you live. Because strikes and impacting the wealth of the people who make decisions is the only choice we have, the only option we have in the future between now and forever in trying to make a difference. And the whole situation with Palestine is really opened a lot of people's eyes, and I'm hoping that as we get into the second Trump administration, people see just how things continue to worsen. That it'll hopefully, I'm really hoping that it'll energize people to learn about the need for power and getting organized. I'm hoping.
Yeah, and just because this broadcasts out of a college campus, I do want to also, uh, make a fine point on like the repression of student protests that happened over the course of last year,
Absolutely.
because it's that to that very point, today's college students are tomorrow's worker, and they do not want you to have an international perspective. To the extent that any kind of labor action does happen, they certainly do not want you to have empathy for countries and institutions that profit greatly from our military industrial complex. And keep in mind that is part of the reason this repression has been so severe. As we reported last year, University of Michigan were very heavy-handed. They've gone in and changed some of the rules in their student handbook, trying to quash this out. Western Michigan University, as we reported last year, much softer approach, but at the same time, did what they could to make sure the encampment that popped up here on campus was taken down as soon as possible. A lot of bad faith negotiations with the pro-Palestine coalition on campus. And when they have actually tried to have these campus conversations about it, which is one of the demands from Palestine, they've had these pro-Zionist voices kind of given a monopoly on speaking time. So while there weren't any kind of jackbooted policemen, knocking heads here on campus, it is still they have still been kind of working in their own sort of way to repress that kind of speech. Because, like as you pointed, like a lot of the genie being out of the bottle is the fact that we're seeing this independent media that young people even 10 years ago weren't. I'd say like one of the biggest differences between now and 10 years ago was there is this much greater and broader sense of solidarity among young people on an international level, that even like when Bernie Sanders was running in 2016, you didn't really hear a lot of people organizing around Palestine or issues of like drone warfare or something, where that is a much bigger part of the conversation. And I think it is definitely scaring the ruling class in a big way. Now that repression is going to continue into this year. There's potentially legislation that could get the plug pulled on our show because we are avowedly pro-Palestine and critical of Zionism, and there is stuff in the pipeline to make that kind of public speech illegal. Um, in which case, we'll probably relocate the show to a local park and just shout with megaphones or something. Who knows? But life finds a
Pirate
way.
radio,
As
baby.
yeah,
We're getting into the
yeah.
future. Yep.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Cyberpunk
yeah.
time.
Um, but I'd also say, y'all, one thing that you should keep heart in these increasingly repressive times is, one of the first things that happened after the election, I went to a meeting with some comrades, Southwest Michigan DSA, and it was standing room only. Times like this are mobilizing people in a way I don't think we necessarily would have seen if Harris had got elected, and it does provide us a window of opportunity to increase class organizing, increase class consciousness along lines that can actually build power. As you mentioned, the work that we've been doing in the community, we're trying to get a tenants union going again in the Vine. There are tenants unions currently active here in the Kalamazoo area. Um, and do have some heart. There is hope. I did want to touch briefly on this was something that happened towards the end of the year, and I did speak briefly on it in our last episode, but it's developed in some interesting ways that I did not really foresee at the time. And honestly, I was kind of cynical about it. I thought, oh, this story is gonna disappear from the news cycle pretty quickly, whether they find the guy or not. I think you're about to, or gal, or non-binary person, whoever it ended up being. And um, I also was trying to, kind of tell listeners, like, look, this particular act of vigilante violence, it has proven to be very cathartic for the working class, but we need to organize, maybe like a medical death strike or something. Um, I did mention this at the time, but kind of jokingly, it's like I don't think I've seen this many Americans united across like political lines since they got Osama bin Laden. And what has been very interesting about this story, it has stayed in the news. It has stayed in the news, and despite again the mainstream capitalist media working overtime to try to paint this event and this perpetrator in a bad light, I have seen people who Fox News viewers sounding like militant guerrilla leftists when it comes to this specific issue. And what it has really kind of shown me is um it has not really been since 2016 that I had any hope of an actual American working class movement seizing that kind of power. I think like, broad things here and there had the potential, had revolutionary potential. But if I were a betting man for the last 4 years, I'd say like America, I think the best we can hope for, it's gonna fall apart, it's gonna balkanize, it's gonna be really unpleasant to live through, and hopefully we can make something better at the other side. Healthcare and the kind of atrocity of our healthcare system that affects literally everybody in this country. It is it is kind of shown to be this sort of skeleton key to class consciousness. Because, like I said, even people who consider themselves ideologically right, you get them start talking about Luigi or the healthcare system more broadly, and everybody starts sounding like a socialist. So, it has given me this interesting kind of hope that I have not had in a long time about the potential for people in the most heavily propagandized nation on earth to organize themselves along class lines. Because in the last half month of 2024, that's kind of what I saw. Tristan, you have thoughts on this event that happened last about a month
Yeah.
ago?
Yeah, so the the agitation potential around healthcare is definitely there. There's a like across, like you said, across um, identity, across gender and um, blue collar, white collar, everyone is um, cheering him on, I guess. But yeah, but with regards to like the potential, like what comes from the healthcare potential, I try to think of like what makes workers and renters so powerful, and how can they be powerful? And it's because of their connection to property, right? Workers are the reason that wealth exists, and that what is that like when we stand, everything falls apart, right? Everything is on our shoulders, and when workers choose to stand, that's when it'll all fall apart because the workers are the ones who produce everything. The workers are the ones working in the restaurants, working on the floor of the ER, working in picking up our trash and working in factories or gas stations or anywhere, working in special needs, working in education, work everywhere. The whole freaking country runs on the work. And if the workers are organized and choose for themselves, you know what? We deserve healthcare. And I'm not talking about none of this crap insurance that I'm spending money on all the time. And I'm not talking about whatever scraps they're willing to give us. And I'm not talking about them starting a war somewhere in order to give me, um, you know, whatever nationalized healthcare they think they've got in some of these other Western nations. Like, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the people who own the hospitals and the people who own the medicine and make the medicine and things like that they decide where it's going to go. And so the workers decide if someone is sick, they get the help they need, period. Period, period. And if we want to be able to get to that organizing around that issue specifically is not going to give us the power we need in order to make that happen. But if we have the power already from the organized labor and from the organized tenants, then those organized tenants and organized workers can then make that demand, right? And I also agree that like there's there's potential because it impacts people regardless of their identity, but there's also a side of it that also scares me a little bit because you talk about healthcare and you organize around the healthcare issue. We still haven't settled our culture around the issue of trans healthcare. I want to be like, yes, protect healthcare. Let's organize around healthcare issues because I want access to my healthcare. I want access to my medication. I want access to transition related care, psychological services, HRT, and surgical services if they're available, those types of things. And I consider that to be a part of my personal health. And organizing around and getting national healthcare would help me to achieve those things if the people I'm organizing with also agree that that is healthcare and that's something that should be provided. And so that's where there's like there's still, areas where we need to be advocating for full inclusion as well. And there's also the idea of like a lot of labor unions, certain labor unions, certain industries might be dealing with a lot of history of misogyny or patriarchal standards, homophobia, just exclusion in general, even racism in certain areas. And uh and so like
We reported earlier this year about like Sean O'Brien, the Teamsters, like throwing trans people under the bus. That was one of
yes,
my like scariest stories from last year for me. But yeah, it's a
it's so hard. It's so hard. And it's um but it's necessary. Right? It's the only place where the power's at. You have to organize with people who might not be ready yet. And it's scary. I'm a trans woman. I knock on doors. I'm out in the community. I'm trying to talk to people and stuff like that. And I get a lot of nasty looks from people or doors slammed in my face and things like that. And I want to assume it's because there's people just don't like being bothered. But sometimes I know that it's because there's prejudice, and yeah, so that's something that comes up with regards to the health. care issue in particular, just because I consider that to be healthcare. I consider abortion to be healthcare. But there's a lot of people who are working class people who have been so indoctrinated by this conservative BS that they might not support abortion rights under a national healthcare system that we're fighting for. When that's definitely something that a socialist would be fighting for. So, but yeah, so and with regards to this person who committed this crime, um, I I don't think that they are a hero, um, but they are a symptom of a system. It's kind of interesting to me that people who come from he was from more privileged upbringing. Sometimes it feels like people who come from that background are more likely to crack than the people who come from working class. Because if he had to deal with the kinds of shit that working class people have to deal with, and with regards to the healthcare system, for as long as we do, without cracking, it's kind of wild that that he ended up being the one to try to do something. But certainly not a hero. Uh, but if it brings the class together, I'm always like, yeah, man, we should definitely be stopping these people taking advantage of us. That's right.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we're about at time to wrap things up, and we'll be with you through this rocky and turbulent year. Um, again, there's a lot of stuff that happened just even in the last couple of days that we have got. I mean, this was a reflection on last year. We're already starting with the chaos is coming. Um, I guess like any parting thoughts as we close out this holiday special about the year that was, and just any just kind of parting words about preparing for the year to come.
Yeah, 2024 for me felt like a lot of learning, um, and a lot of learning about what this work is going to look like and what it's going to take to win. And I'm hoping that people are walking away from 2024 not with a feeling of like everything is terrible and everything sucks, but more of a feeling of like, I have a duty, I have a responsibility to get involved and to make a difference. And whether that's, you know, helping to fight for a union at your workplace, whether that's working with we the people and we the tenants of Kalamazoo and trying to organize a powerful tenant association here in our local county, or if it's showing up in real ways to try to help people in your life who are in need, but that like just do something. You need to have that duty, that responsibility, that feeling that like you have to be doing something to help. And that's what I hope that everyone is feeling moving into 2025, that the reason that things are the way they are is because people are not getting involved, and we need them to. We need lots of people involved. So
Oh,
that's what I'm hoping.
that does remind me too, before we close out, I believe on the subject of getting involved, there's a community event being facilitated tomorrow that you're a part of. Could you tell folks about that real quick?
Yeah, let me get the details here again. Tomorrow, Tuesday, January 7th, Edison Neighborhood Association. I believe it starts at 6:30. Um, uh, my contact, Magic D Radio is putting it on, and I think it's just supposed to be a community discussion about some of the things that we're concerned about with the return of the Trump presidency and now a Republican trifecta on top of it, the new Supreme Court, and some of the things that our more marginalized communities are going to be facing. I'll be talking a little bit about what I'm, concerned about and what the trans community is concerned about. And I'll be reiterating some of the things I've said here as well, just about how power is built and how we need to be moving in the future. But yeah, I hope that if people are around, that they'll come on down and be a part of that discussion.
All right, and I believe that's tomorrow at 6 at the Edison Neighborhood Association. Is that correct?
Yes, Edison neighborhood.
Okay. All right. Tristan, thank you for taking time out of your evening to join us on this holiday special. Much love to you and yours. And I guess we'll see you out there in the streets. I don't have too much else, folks. You hear from me every week, and you'll hear lots of reassurance and lots of gloom and doom with some reassurance in there and points of optimism. I'll just close with some kind of funny. So, as we mentioned at the top of the show, I'm not actually, I'm not a student. I'm an alumni at Western, so I don't winter break. I still take off because just it's time to decompress. I don't need to be following the news for like 2.5 weeks. It's kind of nice. But I did one of the gifts I got this year for Christmas. I got this graphic novel. It's called Billionaire Island.
Ooh.
Um, from my wife, and this is chicken soup for the working class soul. You can find it anywhere you buy books. You could probably order it from a local bookstore, but it's delightful. And like I said, it's chicken soup for the working class soul. Uh,
That's called
anyway,
Billionaire Island.
Billionaire Island. It's by Mark Russell, Steve Pugh, and Chris Chuckery, but it's very irreverent, topical, especially in light of recent events. Um, just and so on the back, a savage satire. Welcome to Billionaire Island, where anything goes if you can afford it. But the island's ultra-rich inhabitants are about to learn that their ill-gotten gains come at a very high price. So, yeah,
Oh, all
yeah.
right.
I won't spoil anything that I'm not. All right. Tristan, thank you so much for joining us and everybody out there at home. Until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.